I vibe with kind of getting to know people and seeing like, do I have a connection with this person and can I help them? That's how I choose the people, but I choose to give back that way because was what was given to me. And if it wasn't the case, I don't know that I would be doing this freelance or learning what I've learned, So I think when you learn something, it's really important to sort of give it back because otherwise then it's just kind of you hoarding all this information, and I think other people can have a lot of good use for it,
Started here.
Cool. Okay.
So Emmanuel, I really want to thank you for coming on Cup of Joe. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And, thank you for having me.
You bet, man. We worked together a long time ago at the Orphanage, and that's where I got to know you first, and then we went on to ImageMovers Digital together. And and so you were always a treat to work with. And back in my desktop days, you were more of a customer than the render world, where didn't come into any contact for work-related reasons much, but it was always wonderful. And so I've been catching up on your background since we haven't worked together for a while. So I thought I'd introduce you here. You got your start actually in architecture and photography at the Art Center of College Design and California College Art. So it wasn't a necessarily traditional CG school background, but then you went on to a pretty traditional legacy of LucasFilm, ILM, Sony, the Orphanage, Imageworks Digital, where again we worked together, Warner Brothers, Columbia, Disney, Magic Leap, that was news to me, and Marvel. I know there was even more. I know you got your start here. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, your first big break is previs for Phantom Menace with Star Wars. Was that kind of the first big break for you, or was there something before that?
I think it depends on what you call a big break, but I think that was my first thing into film. Yeah.
And you worked on the ranch there, right? That was working in the original,
at the ranch.
The original like third floor main house crew, which we'll probably talk about a bit. And so, I think that's a pretty big start. and then you also you kind of jumped around a bit. So you did the modeling on Perfect Storm, but then you went into matte painting, which I think is where that's where I first met you. You worked on Sin City, Grindhouse, and Planet Terror, both of them. One of my favorite credits. I always say that in almost all my interviews, but I just love having credit on that movie. And Superman Returns was another one. And then there was a lot of work in the area of different titles. I was going to ask you about this, but you have illustrator, concept designer, and concept artist for various titles like Blade Runner, Matrix 4, Godzilla, King of Monsters, Ready Player One, Elysium, another one for my heart. I worked at Image Engine. Just loved that movie. Cloud Atlas, Captain America, First Avenger, A Christmas Carol, of course, and Iron Man. And so it's sort of a pretty wide range, not only of roles, but of studios. What a career. It's real nice to see how much you've done since we've talked. I
mean, since IMD, it's been what, 10 years? Or a little bit more?
Yeah, that's exactly right. 2010 is around the end of that studio's time. I did have a question for you going through there, and maybe it's something you can clarify for some of the people here is the difference between these titles. Are they simply sort of just that's what they chose to call them, or is the difference between, say, illustrator and a concept designer and concept artist? Is there a difference in those titles?
Yeah, there's really not a whole lot of difference. I think it just depends on. For the union, I'm classified as a senior illustrator. So I bill, for that. So that's an official title, but honestly, it's really a concept designer. Sometimes the games, people call it a concept designer. It's the same thing. Basically, you're just illustrating and designing based on, whatever the problem is, you try to solve it. And that's pretty much, they don't really change. The job is the same.
Okay. Now, and it's a more of an upstream in the general pipeline of things getting done. A lot of the work you do is sort of would you say is defining some of the look alongside, of course, the director and the other creative leadership. You get to sort of define the look that will be then lit and modeled later on down the line. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, I think initially, yes. Now it's pretty much pre-production. So it's pretty much I'm the first wave. They'll hire me to either do a pitch or to actually work on the pre-production so that you can design all the stuff. and then after that's all designed, then it goes down go down the pipeline. But the thing is, a lot of times I also do some stuff for VFX because sometimes like say ILM or Method or some studio will say, well, we have a sequence and well, it wasn't really touched, it was missed. So they need a concept designer to help them flesh it out a little bit. So I also do work in post, but it's rare these days. It's really more pre-production.
Yeah. And do you get more creative latitude in that earlier pre-production one? I guess you then.
I think it depends on who you're working with. Sometimes the post stuff can be really fun and creative as well, just because they kind of leave you alone to do what you need to do. But I think it depends on who you're working with. But yes, usually, typically, pre-production is a little bit more blue sky and flexible, and but it depends, right? Because if the director has a really clear vision of what he wants, you're pretty much just solving his problem. So. And some directors want you to go off and do really creative stuff. So it depends. It depends on who you work with. But typically, yes.
All right. Well, going back to your school, like I mentioned before, and this is probably true for a lot of folks I'm talking to that maybe started in the mid 90s or even earlier, there wasn't necessarily a catalog of schools with CG for movies, programs out there. And so it's usually most people seem to have a combination of some sort of set of skills from this direction and that direction that drove them towards being a CG artist. In your case, 3D, I imagine there's a 3D knowledge that came with architecture and understanding structure and all the things that came with that mixed with photography definitely seemed to lay the groundwork. But you had some life events that really caused you to move away from photography and towards CG. And can you tell me a little bit about that changeover and also why you maybe chose CG in
I mean, it's really interesting because on I think my last semester of school or second to last, I'm not sure what one of those semesters being in the interior architecture program, you had to take some kind of an elective class, and I said, well, I mean, let's try computer modeling, whatever that was, and we're talking, this was maybe 20 some years ago. And there was a class, a Form Z class, which was this modeler that nobody really uses anymore. But and I took it. I took the class, and for some reason I just kind of got hooked onto 3D, and I thought, wow, this is sort of the wave of the future. I mean, this is so cool. How can you not want to use this? And at that time, I think I had the one class, and then I didn't really know much after that, but it was enough. It got me hooked enough that I went and I basically bought, the next generation power PC computer with the monitor and everything, and I actually went into debt for that. I mean, I still remember it cost like $7,000. I mean, 20 some years ago. Yeah,
that's right. The Power PC was the other brand of Apple that was available during those times, right? Was that?
Yeah, this was the first one. The first one they made, the Power PC, the first one. So, I got that, and I was at home, and I guess, I lucked into somebody having a crack at that point because, like, I couldn't afford after that to buy Form Z. I didn't even know. So basically, I had no manual. I had this thing that was working, kind of, would crash a lot, but and I had to, learn it, at home, basically, after the, you took a class, but you didn't know everything. A lot of the tools you didn't know, and the rendering, I guessed that. So I would just sit at home and just, like press buttons and try to figure it out. I mean, that's how much into it I was. Gotcha. But, that led me to do some of, I did some renderings. There was a job opening from the, career center, and said, hey, you want to go and see what this is all about? And it was just some multimedia job, and I went there with a couple of floppies, basically, and I just dumped a bunch of JPEGs into a bunch of floppies, and then went to the interview, and that was it, really. And at that time, I mean, I was still pretty new and fresh at CG. I really still didn't know. I mean, I didn't know tiling. I didn't know any of this stuff. That I was just kind of like, that. I mean, I still remember I was trying to make some wood, like look like wood, some flooring, And then I tiled it, I guess, too many times. I didn't know what I was doing, and it looked like sand. And I was like, oh, well, whatever. Okay, yeah, it's sand. So I thought, well, I just figured out how to do sand. It's just like that. And I went on the interview, and basically, I looked into the fact that the owner was a race car designer, and I was a race car driver. And we ended up talking a lot. And my stuff looked okay. It certainly wasn't like beautifully rendered or anything. Well, I guess I looked into that one. But then after that, I mean, I really, the guy who hired me, I really just try to get all the knowledge I could from him. And so that's where I kind of went learning about everything, like modeling, rendering, the Photoshop. I didn't know Photoshop all that well. Painting, all that kind of stuff came there. So that's just a long drawn out way of telling you like what happened, because that I thought I was going to go into like drawing blueprints and designing architecture, but that never happened.
Do you still pursue the photography part of your craft, or is that something you do on the side? I mean, nearly every artist I know is a good photographer, to be honest. It sort of comes with the craft, I believe. Most visual artists.
Well, I mean, photography was my first, sort of artistic expression. It came when I was at the beginning of high school in like 9th grade. So, I mean, that'll always be with me. And I think it comes out in the way I do things and in my work. But, in terms of just photography, I do it for myself. So, I have my own, so it's just a hobby at this point. I don't really, I use a lot of it in my work. In terms
so
of
you'll bring in photos that you've done into concept work or paintings.
More like the concept of the photography and exposure and what kind of lensing and like if I'm like right now I'm doing a lot of more storytelling kind of moments and keyframes, but those are all sort of I make it more photographic because it's just the way I am by nature. And I'll look at it and say, well, what kind of lens would I use? If this event happened in space right in front of me, how would I shoot it with a camera? And that's how I construct a lot of my images. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, and you had mentioned this person you allied yourself with, this other race car driver owner, and try to get as much information as you can. I guess it speaks towards a trend that I saw a little bit about mentoring through your career, both as a mentee and a mentor. I think that might be a good segue into some of that work you did at Phantom Menace. You worked with Doug Chang in the 3rd floor of the main house. Now, for those that don't know, and I think I've talked about this on a previous interview, the 3rd floor of the main house was, from the ILM perspective, where I worked at the same time, I was sort of considered the holy tower of VFX, where George really did a lot of his pre-production, pre-animatics, pre-visualization, with everything from foam core cutouts to animatics, correct? I mean, maybe you can explain a little bit more about what was like being in that team.
Yeah, so the main house is another sort of lucky break, and I had a friend who worked there that kind of got me in, because I mean, but at that point I already was, I had some skills, and I went up there, and yeah, I mean, I worked at the 3rd floor, and there was like 2 ends. One end was where all the animatics guys were. So that's where I was. And then, then you have this hallway, and then the other end is where all the concept guys were, art department basically, and Doug Chang was there. And then George would come up, every so often, to sort of talk and look at the maquettes, look at the drawings, and then come up with animatics and look at what we were doing. And I've had George stand behind me a couple times, which is like sweat rolling down my head, because it's stressful, like he's just sitting right there and you're like, oh, and then he's just going, okay, well, I just said move that thing, and you're like shaking. That happened a few times, but basically I mean I was very inspired, and I would always wander across the hallway. I mean, in a hallway we're talking like 10 feet.
It's literally like the attic of a reconstructed old house. So it has the feel of vaulted ceilings, if I remember correctly. I've been up there a few times when I used to deliver for the mailroom, and it was vaulted ceilings and very tight space. I mean, this is not some large creative zone.
I mean, the animatics crew was maybe 4 or 5 of us, and the art department was maybe another 5 or 6. And you were talking like 10 feet, and then you're in the, it's not a long hallway. But it was great because I mean I got to meet a lot of the people that I would later on work with, like Doug Chang being one of them, and there were a whole bunch of other people that I would Ed Natividad, Jay Schuster, all these people I still know. And Mark Havana, who actually worked with Doug for a long time. I think he was on Christmas Carol for a little while, and then he left, Mark Havana. But yeah, I mean it was a great experience, really. And I remember trying to foster that relationship with Doug, because at that point I wasn't even an artist yet, really. I was more like a technical sort of, I did 3D stuff, I modeled, I textured, composited, but I wasn't really sort of like the art team there. And I was like, there's no way I can be that. But fast forward like another 10 years, he actually hired me to, for Christmas Carol. So that was definitely, I mean, that's where I met him. And I quizzed him definitely a lot on our lunches, because Doug never takes lunch. He never goes out for lunch. And I would just wander into his office with his his mouth half full, and I would be like, well, what does it take to get into the industry? And he would he would be really honest with me and tell me what it took. And it, basically it took me over 10 years to get to that point where he would even consider hiring me. So. And
that was at ImageMovers Digital when he brought you into that realm. That's correct.
Basically it was I left the Orphanage to go to ImageMovers.
Yeah, I seem to remember that. That was before the unfortunate closure of the Orphanage. You left before that.
It was basically like months before.
Same here. Yeah, we were the last of us, and it was
I was like, whoa.
and it was, if there was ever a good time for a studio to close, I mean, a good half of the Orphanage or more was probably inducted into ImageMovers Digital over that next month after that closure.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful thing to sort of have
That wasn't why you went, was it?
No, I had saw the writing on the wall. I mean, when you work in render and IT, and I knew what was coming. It was getting pretty rough. We were already on 4-day weeks, right? And God bless them for trying. But I saw the writing on the wall, and the opportunity came up to sort of step up the render game and build a render farm with Disney at Imageworks Digital. So I couldn't really resist that opportunity to move over, and started with a team of 2 wranglers. He was in pre-production, and ended with 15 folks and a petabyte of storage and 15,000 procs. And it was a great place. As the studio grew, I grew with it, and it was really nice. It was where I really leapt up and grew to sort of that next level. So yeah, and then moved on to Disney. I stayed with Disney after that, actually. So I guess my point being is that Doug's, essentially it's that role of that mentee, that person giving you some influence early on, you staying in touch with them, and probably even as I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, at ImageMovers Digital, the art department, or Doug Chang's department, it's a little bigger than just, I call it an art department. His department was sort of a studio within the studio. We, at least those of us in the rest of the studio, saw it that way. And it was a great thing at the end, because they provided that nimble, small studio reaction. And when we had to be a big 400-person studio on the outside growing pains, you could always get it into Doug's area, and it would pop out the other end with some 3ds Max render instead of a Maya render, and boom, something was solved quickly. So it was a great thing. But in that sense, was he mentoring you, or do you see him as a mentor at that stage, or do you feel at that point you were more in the collaborators stage?
You mean at IMD?
At IMD, yeah.
Yeah, IMD, it was just pretty much like I was working for him, and it was more of it was more of just working for Doug and trying to get him what he wants, and improving your skills, because it was the first time I actually worked in animation, really. I mean, it's as close to live action as animation gets, but it's still animation, so it was new to me, and I was trying to figure out Doug and just the whole dynamic of the art department that he likes.
He sort of defined the heart and soul of IMD. I mean, as much as Zemeckis did from afar.
It was his baby for sure.
It was more of a Doug Chang studio than a Disney studio. And you felt it there. He he and the other leaders really treated everyone really well and really built it to the model that everyone thought was the best model, even if it was maybe hard to maintain financially. It was a beautifully built studio that by the end of Christmas Carol and the start of Marcy's Mom was quite well tuned. So sad to see it go.
Yeah, definitely.
So this leads me on to one of the things I listened to in preparation for this was you interviewing a concept artist that you mentored, Jonathan Guzzi, I think is his name. And you talked about, helping him along. And so I was wondering, on the flip side of that, people have given you a break and you spoke of your initial, your boss that was a race car driver, you've got Doug, other folks along the way gave you that opportunity. And now you're sort of sharing down a little bit of that knowledge and opportunity. I guess number one is that the only instance you've had, or have you had other instances of sort of being a mentor? And if so, what do you get out of being the other side of it, of being a mentee? What's the reward or the feedback that you get personally from doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple, pretty big influences and mentors. I mean, one being George Hall, which he was actually right after IMD, because I called him freaking out, going, "Well, I don't know what to do." And I met him at ILM, and I said, I don't know what to do. What does a freelance lifestyle look like? Because I have a disability. So for me, I never even considered it because I thought, oh, I need insurance. So, obviously at that time it was, you have a pre-existing condition, no one's going to give you insurance. So I was freaking out, going, well, I'm not going to get insurance now. What am I going to do? And I called him, and he was like, okay, look, I'm going to tell you what the deal is, and I'm going to work with you and try to, get you to where you can get jobs. And he was just really cool about it. And it became more of a mentorship. And then right at the beginning, he actually even hired me to do some stuff for him. And it wasn't so much like, it was a mentoring, like more, I treated him more like a mentor, let's put it that way. He was just like trying to be friendly. And just being a good guy, but I saw that as being a mentor. At the Orphanage, I had mentors. Definitely Brian Flora, helped me a lot, and Mike Congrazio. I mean, I was really green at that point. It's my first matte painting job. So, when you have so much help through the years, you tend to. I mean, I'm the kind of person that says, well, I had a lot of help. I wouldn't have gotten here without any help. So I need to, when the situation arises, I need to do the same for other people. And so, like people like Jonathan Guzzi, he basically just contacts me out of the blue and just say, hey, can you do like a directed study class? We need to do it with a professional. I said, okay, whatever, why not? Low impact. And I kind of just, we finished the class. It was kind of like, because he was so busy with all the classes, I was just kind of, I didn't need it, whatever. And then he just packed up his stuff and he drove from New York to here. He packed up his life, basically, drove to the West Coast and said, hey.
On a motorcycle, no less. On a motorcycle.
On a motorcycle.
That's crazy.
And, stay in my sister at that time had a place she was actually, renovating. So I said, just stay there for like 2 weeks until you find a place. But you can, you're welcome to come to my house, and I'll do what I can to, and that was like, basically he did that for the next year. He did that every day, and then he got a job, and I said, okay, this is over. We're friends now. No more, this mentor stuff. But I felt really good doing that, and I've done that. I actually taught at the academy. I did director study. I did a class, but I really didn't vibe with teaching a big class. I vibe with kind of getting to know people and seeing, like, do I have a connection with this person, and can I help them? That's how I choose the people, but I choose to give back that way because was what was given to me. And if it wasn't the case, I don't know that I would be doing this freelance or learning what I've learned. So I think when you learn something, it's really important to sort of give it back, because otherwise, then it's just kind of you hoarding all this information, and I think other people can have a lot of good use for it.
Yeah, I agree. I've mentored folks. Usually, I had a lot of juniors working for me through the years of all that render business. So I
Mhm.
mentored as part of my job was to really mentor a lot of them, and I just take such delight in all of their success. And the ones that I mentored the hardest or the longest, in the deepest, I guess we're all good friends now. So that's another nice thing. That's a byproduct. I find out of a mentor relationship, you should end up with a strong friend at the end of that, as you did. And the other thing, of course, is I don't know how it is for you, but I find it always. I strengthen when I have to explain it to someone else, when I have to, teach someone or instruct someone with what I've been doing intuitively or just in my own world. And now I have to turn it into words and action that someone else can do. I always find that's a little challenging, and it makes me lock in, solidify whatever
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
no,
we're
that's
talking
true.
about.
It does do that. It does do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So that's great. I really glad to see it, and was to see that you pass it on that way. You pass it on with your art department podcast. I'll make sure to put a link in this video to it. But you're on YouTube as a YouTube. Well, I don't know what we call ourselves, a YouTube personality, a YouTube content generator.
Well, no, we're not quite at that point, but I mean, we just started that just to, just to give people a little bit of information more than just bro talk, because there's a lot of channels for that. I mean, we just want to be informative and just, make it an open book, like
Mhm.
what are my fears and, how much can you charge and, just things that people want to know.
Yeah, they're very, a lot of your subjects are very sort of, uh, the part that you're not going to learn in any class. Like, how do you get bids? How do you deal with your reel? I myself am going to be doing one that's, dealing with render forecasting and how do you deal with projecting your needs, right? Because as you know, that's all I did. And unfortunately, a lot of folks don't know where to start with that. And if you don't, especially if you're an independent, if you can't forecast how much you're going to need on a render farm or in disk space for your project, well, you're gonna have problems. Another thing I came across was you were a bit of, I don't want to say affected by COVID, because I know that you survived without getting tested positive, but you were sort of an early affected early in this pandemic, because I believe you were in Europe, if it was not France, at a conference that was canceled in, I think it was April, when all this was going down. And so it was harrowing to listen to your story, which of having to be stuck on plane with people coughing and all that. I mean, I was paranoid in January flying when I saw plane loads of folks coming in from the Asian flights as we all merged in customs coming in, and that was January. So I can imagine the paranoia. And then, of course, you did get a little sick. But I'm glad to see that you didn't get COVID and you survived okay. But I guess the question really leading to is just the whole COVID thing. You've done some talks on the, this new normal when it was just a new term. It's been a while now since you first were talking, at least what I saw out there, about this whole working from home thing. So I wanted to ask, how has it settled in for you professionally and or personally with working from home
Um,
now? 9 months in we are, I think, into this.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be much longer. But I mean, honestly, I had the beginning was tough for me. I was, I think I was a little bit depressed just because from the fact of, all these people were being affected and it was just bombarded by the news every day. I didn't know how to handle it. So, and the industry shut down. I mean, the movie industry just shut down basically. And most people I know weren't working. I wasn't working. I didn't work for like 3, 4 months actually. Um, so
It's really post-production kept cranking, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
pre-production and production itself definitely paused across the
Yeah,
industry.
they completely paused, and I was like, "Well, okay, is this going to be sort of? Do I need to freak out? Do I need to, like I didn't know." But I think I took this chance to really change my lifestyle and say, "Okay, well, what can I do to make myself a better person, and what can I do to make the best out of this situation?" And I think I went from really not liking this whole lockdown thing to really uh, adjusting to it to the point where I think I'm going to take even when it opens back up, I'm going to take a lot of what I've learned and use it. Uh, I don't. It showed me a lot of things I didn't need, and what I do need, and I, for me, it's just like changing your schedule. Instead of going to the gym, where do you go to work? Making sure that you have a set time to keep yourself healthy, exercise. I cooked a lot more.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
things that you can learn, and you find out, wow, okay, actually, it's not so bad. It's pretty good actually. Uh, so and work wise, I mean, I have more time to do what I want to do now. And then, of course, the last couple of months have been crazy busy, to the point where now I have to take a break.
Yeah, I am happy that overall, even though I know there was a bump there in production, overall, this part of show business has been busy, and on my side with post production, it's been almost no interruption. And in fact, a lot of the studios have expanded their footprint with everyone working from home. Have now expanded their footprint, especially in animation, but also in VFX. So now they, if they want to go back to their brick and mortar location, they wouldn't have the desks to cover their new staff size. So there's actually been growth, up here, and I'm seeing in some of the other VFX cities around the world, a fair amount of growth and optimism, I guess you'd say. Luckily I'm involved in the forecasting game still, so I deal with a lot of shows trying to figure out what next couple quarters look like, and it's really busy. So I'm sure our farm will continue to be at 100% rented, like it's been so much.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has changed a lot of things for a lot of people, and it's changed a lot for people working. You can now say, well, what do you mean you can't do remote work? You can, because it's been proven that you can.
Yeah,
because they're going to want people to go back to the studios, right? They're going to want people to go back to work, and at some point, maybe there's going to be a lot of hybrid people.
I have a feeling that the studios will, one, start to do the math of bringing people back and seeing how much cheaper it is to let people work from home. If there's a 5% hit on productivity, but a 30% reduction in costs, maybe it's worth it. I think there's gonna be a little bit of that. And there's also this nice, I guess, there are these weird silver linings out of all of this terrible tragedy. And that is, for instance, I have some friends and coworkers in the industry who are either somehow impaired either with mobility or with health issues that make it difficult for them. I mean, unless you're in the best of health, it's really hard to do a 50-hour VFX week after week. Like, just the people I know who are most in shape still get the flu when they finish a show, and collapse and exhaustion, and so as a result, I believe there's been a bit of a leveling. I know people who right now would be like on temporary disability or having to take out some time to deal with their health, but because they're able to work from home and take a break on their couch, or maybe grab an ice pack and stay in their jammies and work, all of a sudden they can work. And I think that it's sort of leveled the playing field out there a little bit for folks who had a difficult time working in VFX because of all those pressures and time pressures of having to be at work and commute. Maybe they had kids, right? Childcare and all that. And I think all those people being able to, you can better do a 50-hour week if you can do it from home. You can do a more effective 50-hour week from home than you can having to deal with commuting and dealing with everyone taking lunch breaks and waiting into the elevators and the water cooler talk and all the time sucks of life. I think they're going to find that they're getting overall greater efficiency, and the cost savings are so huge when they can reduce their brick and mortar presence. So we do co-location, where people move their data centers into our data center right next to the render, and we've seen a growth in that area this COVID because people are shrinking their footprints. They're saying, if I got everybody home for another 6 months to a year, why am I paying for a 40-seat, 100-seat, 200-seat building? That's expensive in Vancouver.
Oh yeah.
Vancouver, no less. It's like San Francisco prices. So I think we're going to see it continue to stay like this to some degree. But yes, there'll be a creative core. Production people will get sucked in. Executive producers, editors. It's hard for editors and DI. It's a little more challenging for those folks to be working from their apartment than your average VFX worker. But I'm optimistic that most of us will be working from home for the coming.
At least, or some kind of hybrid at the very least.
Exactly. Maybe we come in on, for certain meetings, or they have, sort of what we have in our industry a lot on the sales side is what do they call them? Hotel desks. So they'll have just a whole series of desks where you can just come in, you log in, and your phone, get your phone extension, and you just plug in your laptop, and they're just, offices full of desks that are unassigned, and people can just come and go as they need. And I think you'll see a lot more of that hotel desking and WeWork kind of solutions, all that kind of stuff. So I think if nothing else, it broke the argument that we heard for years that in no way, shape, or form can people work from home, and the fallacy that everyone will just slough off and not work hard. That's been proven to not be true at all. I'm sure someone out there, someone's slacking, I'm sure, out there. But for the most part, everyone I know is working a little harder. They're starting early. They're checking on email after 9, all that kind of stuff. I see it all the time. And so I think they get more bang for their buck out of these home workers than when they're all having to deal with commuting in every day. So we'll see where that goes. This has been a great conversation. I'm sure I could just go on and on. Like you said, bro talk.
Yeah.
We could just do their jobs. But I really want to talk about some of those issues about mentorship. And really, I appreciate your role in the industry. I remember when I started the Orphanage, you were someone who was, reached out as soon as you met me. You were the kind of person that you need to have, a handful of these folks in the company that sort of say, oh, hey, you're new. Hey, well, stop by if you have a question. Like, you were one of those people. So I appreciate it. That was the first or the second studio I'd ever worked at. Right. So all I knew was ILM from the mailroom up. And all of a sudden I was in this new studio, and it was folks like yourself that were immediately like, yeah, drop on in. Hey, yeah, this is what we're working on. And I just remember that you stood out in that area. And you also did, because, you are in a wheelchair. It also helped me later on because I spent some time doing some facility management for studios. And unfortunately up here in Canada, there's no ADA. So it's not quite as accommodating as I would like to see it. And so a lot of times when I was setting up, I just set up a new building for DD at one point. And I very much was thinking like, okay, at all the times I was thinking about, okay, if we're gonna set this up, how can we set this up to be more accessible? And it was really a seed planted by working with you. And since I worked with some other folks, but yeah, it was nice to kind of carry that through. And unfortunately, when I got up to Canada, it was one of the first things I noticed was, hey, this is a very accessible place. And to this day, I've noticed that it's the effects of, of that strong influence down there is just not up here. So maybe one day. But anyway, I just appreciate you had a bit of influence in my life. So I definitely wanted to include you in some of these first interviews I was doing. And the fact that you're now doing this podcasting, you continue to influence me a bit. So I'll continue to subscribe and like and comment, and I'll link it here. And if you guys ever want to talk about projections, I'm more than happy to talk about it. It's the most boring subject. You'll get the lowest view count of any of your ones. Nobody ever wants to talk about projections, but that's the dirty side.
Hey, but someone's got to talk about it.
The plumber's got to be there. So that's when I come in, Joe the plumber. Well, hey,
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Best luck to your family. Keep the mask on, get the shot when it comes, and I wish you the best of luck. And of course, if you're in Vancouver or anywhere near here when this thing lightens up, please let me know. I will show you the city front to back.
Oh, that'd be great. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate all your time.